Bolovinaka everyone, welcome you back to my channel. I thank you for choosing this videos as part of your revision or part of your learning. These are just some things that we learn in year 12 in Fiji, and it's a poem that is studied under the common theme of progress. Now we've got two poems. One is Kidnapped by Ruperake Petaia, and the other is Reality by Konahele Taman. So this video will just briefly discuss the poem, and if you view my other videos from my channel, I have already discussed on the Reality by Konahele Taman. Okay, before I start, I would just like to just assume that you've already read and you have the poem in front of you. So this is a poem taken from our text called The Possibilities, and your teacher has already given it to you. So this is just going to be the discussion of the poem. You can always comment on below of if you need me to discuss on the poem, or you need me to discuss more on some sample essays. You can even bring the question and I can make a whole video for you. Alright, without further ado, let's begin with our discussion. Okay, first we'll start off with our stanza discussion. Stanza discussion in poetry, we do not have paragraphs, we have stanzas. So there'll be just three, the ones that really stood out. I think there are seven stanzas in our poem. So these are the three ones that really stood out. And once again, when you are doing external questions, the more quotes you have, which is 2 that is required for each poem, you get more marks. So the title and the poet, that'll give you 1 mark. The title, remember, spelling is everything. So Kidnapped and Ruperake Petaia. Right, what I usually share with my kids, some of them might forget the spelling. Just enunciate. Ruperake Petaia. Alright, since we come from Pacific Island, those of us who are native speakers of Fijian or the Bowen dialect, or we are able to enunciate these words and it'll be easy to come by. Alright, let's start with the stanza discussion. Right? Okay, just very quickly, this is what the poem, in your books when you were writing it, they look differently, but this is just one that I've typed out there. So the title, obviously, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 stanzas. Sorry, so I said 7 earlier, but there's actually 6 stanzas. Okay, the ones that we'll be discussing will be, this is the one. Each time Mama and Papa grew poorer and poorer, and my kids grew richer and richer, I grew whiter and whiter. Now from the poem, it is the 1, 2, 3, 4. It is the 5th. So it was the 5th stanza. The 5th stanza stood out because of these certain words that was said. So here. So each time Mama and Papa grew poorer and poorer, and my kidnappers grew richer and richer, and I grew whiter and whiter. Now this stanza is sad, as it shows the parents struggled to pay the huge amount of academic fees. Now, during the time that I'm recording this video, education in Fiji is free. So the government pays for our education, for the students' education, sorry. When the poem was written, or in the native country of our poet, who is Samoan, you had to pay school fees, right? So you had to pay school fees from kindergarten right till high school, and obviously in tertiary. So they had struggled, the parents had struggled to pay their children's school fees. So each time Mama and Papa grew poorer and poorer, and my kidnappers grew richer and richer. Now, if you've been discussing with your teacher, kidnappers are not someone who you would deem in the old movies that you watch, or in the modern movies that you watch, of a typical kidnapper who has a scheme to try and harm you and your family. In this, the poet likens the kidnappers to our formal educators. So it is the colonizers, the white men, that have kidnapped us from our natural or traditional setting to their setting. Okay, so and my kidnappers grew richer and richer, so they were getting rich from the school fees, and I grew whiter and whiter. Whenever I usually us on this line, I grew whiter and whiter. The poet, or sorry, the persona didn't change the complexion or didn't change the color of their skin. It was the way they were thinking. So they became more modernized. They became more as the colonizers thought. They spoke their language. If you were to close your eyes and look at people nowadays, you would think that they were from another country, even though they've never left their native country, which is in the Pacific. You would think that they're from America or New Zealand, etc. Oh, sorry, not New Zealand. New Zealand, they are the native people of New Zealand are the Maori. They could have been from England or somewhere that they predominantly speak English. So we can see that the persona grew whiter in his or her in his thoughts, in his ways, and his mannerisms. So the parents were growing poorer, while he lost his identity cumulatively. Thus, the persona feels that he was kidnapped. So like I said earlier, he felt that he was taken away from his natural surroundings and brought and had to live with these colonizers to and forced to learn what they knew. Stanza discussion is I was held in a classroom guarded by Churchill and Garibaldi pinned up on one wall and Hitler and Mao dictating from the other. Now, this study of British colonist culture on Samoans' lives, such as culture, language, and heritage. So, what these people like Churchill, Garibaldi, and you have the dictator Hitler and the chairman, Chinese chairman Mao, they were dictators in their native countries or where they had come from. So, they were learning about these people in the classroom, and not only do we learn about them, but we actually learn that their ways were also projected on us, native people. The British colonists, they project their ways of thinking or their culture, their history on native people. So it changed our culture, our language, and our heritage. The next stanza discussion is on my release 15 years after I was handed among loud applause from fellow victims. So he could have been graduating from year 12 or year 13, and he was given a certificate. So a piece of paper to decorate my walls certifying my release. So you usually when you graduate from high school or even if he went to tertiary, he would have received a huge fanfare once you've graduated from these places. So he gets that piece of paper among fellow victims, meaning all those native people, all of our friends and our classmates. We all come from the same background, culture, and then we are clapping our hands, congratulating each other, not knowing that we are victims of these colonizers. Now, the poet revealed his skepticism on the colonist education by using the word kidnapping. Especially, the persona believes he was stolen from his parents, in spite of his education, which cost his parents highly, only to get a certificate of his achievement. So all those years from being traumatized from when he left school for kindy, then graduated, parents, everybody is so happy, but at the expense of their parents' money and the parents' dignity. Some of them had to really fork out a lot of money in order to pay for their children's school fees. All right? Okay, moving on. Now, once again, if you don't understand some of the things in this poem or what I'm saying, you can always comment down below. You can always send me a question. If you are friends with me on social media, you can search my name and you can ask these questions. Please don't hesitate because I would really like feedback on whether you've learned or not. Okay, what is this poem about? Now, the poem Kidnapped is a satirical poem which explores the themes of loss of traditional Samoan knowledge, the effects of colonialism, and Western influences on Samoan society. Now, satirical poem, now when something is called to be a satire, it's usually make fun of things that are supposedly serious. So this is a very serious matter on how the colonizers, he's making a very serious claim that colonizers are actually kidnappers. Now they kidnapped us to learn their ways, and to this day we are still being kidnapped by Western influences. Now, I'm saying we, even though our poet is from Samoa, it can mirror us here in Fiji. The same effect of colonization and westernization, it still stands here in Fiji, and you can see a lot of negative impacts. Okay, yes, there's industrialization. Yes, we have better medicine, better healthcare, better education. They brought many things, but they also brought even worse things to our culture and our tradition and our land and our environment. Now, the poem demonstrates a young Samoan boy who is sent to school and is taught an anglicized education and starts to lose his Samoan culture. His experience of a westernized school system is unsatisfying as he is metaphorically compares his education to being kidnapped by a band of Western philosophers. End quote. Now, the poem starts off by saying that, and let me just enlarge this, please. Now, the poem starts off by saying that his mama was careless and sent him to school alone, and one day he gets kidnapped. Now, his kidnappers are holders of BA and MA degrees, so they are well educated in the Western ways and the formal education. So he is blaming his parents for being careless by willingly sending him to school alone. So it could be could be kindergarten, could be preschool, or even class 1. Or year 1. Now he is held in a classroom guarded by Churchill and Garibaldi on one wall, and Hitler and Mao dictating from the other, and Guevara pointing revolution at his brains. Each 3-month term, his kidnappers sent threats to his parents to pay ransom fees, which are school fees. Now every term, his parents grew poorer and poorer, while his kidnappers grew richer and richer, and the boy grew whiter and whiter. He is finally released after 15 years through graduation or via graduation, and is handed a piece of paper to certify his release. So that's basically what the poem is about. Okay, moving on. Now we have subjects. Subjects in the poem is basically characters in the poem, or people or things that are stood out that we will discuss. So once again, in poetry we do not have characters, we have subjects. So our first subject is the persona, or I. The narrator, the persona, conveys his experience in an educational system instituted by colonizers from the age of 6 to the age of 21, 15 years after, as a young boy, going to school alone 5 days a week makes the speaker or the persona feel abandoned by his mother, whom he describes as careless. At school, he feels kidnapped by his teachers because their teaching methods and the content of the teaching is foreign or alien to him, as indicated in stanzas 2 and 3. Now, once again, persona can be you and I when we first went to school, coming from a traditional or having to speak our mother tongue every day. And when we go to school, we are forced to learn the alphabet, the English alphabet. We are forced to learn our numbers in English. We are forced to know colors in English. Alright, so all these things are forced upon us. So you can see the persona, and I hope you are also projecting yourself to his lament. It's more like a cry, and for us to really think. It is a poem that speaks true to our day and age. Okay, second subject is the persona's parents. Now, the persona's parents are first described as careless for sending the persona to school, probably because they could not foresee the negative consequences of losing their traditional culture. Another reason is that due to societal standard and demand introduced by colonizers, all children are supposed to attend school. Right? So the persona was careless, but nowadays there's a lot of stigma if you do not send your children to school. So if you are really going through hard times, there's so many instances where the government, you are getting assistance from the government. So all you have to do is put in as little effort as before. But nowadays, if you do not send your child as a parent to school, you will be taken to task. You can either have social welfare coming to your house and all these things. when in retrospect, yes, in retrospect, the parents, they're giving away their child and they're losing so much, and the government or the colonizers coming after us, we have every right, yeah? But when they came, they took away all these rights and they have implemented or they have projected themselves on us and their ways and their laws, yeah? Okay, moving on, we'll discuss style. Style is very important in poetry. Since poetry doesn't have a lot of words in our poem, it is a free verse, so there are not many rhyming words. There are, it's short, and in poetry in general, the poet has to be very decisive with the words that they put. So each word or each stanza, each line is important in its style or in its setup. And there are plenty questions that come in the external paper about the style. All right, first one is the imagery, the metaphor or poetic diction or the poetic words. Now, metaphor class, remember metaphor is a stylistic device or a figure of speech which is comparing two things without the use of like or as. So metaphor, one day I was kidnapped by a band. Now the word kidnap conjures images of an actual violent snatching of a child. Now, even though we go willingly into the classroom, class 1 or kindy, you actually think about it, the colonizers are snatching or taking us away from our traditional values, our culture. So that gives you an image in your head, the reality of that type of progress, the things that we had to do in order to progress, and I'm putting quotation marks on that progress. Now, progress is supposed to make things better, but what made us seem bad in to begin with, to be proven to be better or to be improved? It all had to come down to the colonizers and them thinking that we needed improvement. Okay, poetic diction or the poetic words, the use of specific words to connote a meaning or to define a meaning. Example, I was 6 when Mama was careless. She sent me to school alone 5 days a week. End of quote. Now this brings out an image of a young child totally unprepared and alone to face the outside world in the form of a Western classroom. Now, I for one, I had a good kindergarten experience because my mother was my teacher. But thinking about other kids who were there who didn't know my mother, who must have always been at home or is an only child, isn't so comfortable with other kids, it must have been hard. Now, recently I just sent my son for kindergarten, and on my first day, without any shame, I'm gonna say this, I cried. I cried outside the gate, and I thought about how my child was leaving me. Well, in that few hours that he was going to go for kindergarten, it's hard. And for the poet to use these words, it also touches a nerve. We force them because it is the society's norm, it's the society's standards to learn in a Western classroom, right? To learn in the Western classroom. Okay, moving on, we have repetition. Example, Mama and Papa grew poorer and poorer, and my kidnappers grew richer and richer. I grew whiter and whiter. Now, this brings out the changing of the persona. So, as the parents were getting older, they were getting poorer, and while the kidnappers or the Western philosophers or the colonizers, sorry, my kids are in the background, and the colonizers, they grew richer and richer, and I grew whiter. Now, once again, he didn't change physically, sorry, he changed internally. All right, so the way he thought, the way he spoke, his mannerisms, it became more of those who was teaching him. So not only that, but through media, mass media, what you watch on TV, what you listen to on the radio, all of that, it changed the perspective of these people. Right, the last style we have is the significance of the title. So the importance of the title kidnapped is being metaphorically used to refer to a comparison where the child is being taken by force by the colonizers or the Europeans to attend school according to Westerners. So once again, You are being kidnapped. You are taken away from your home. You are taken away from your cultural setting, your language, your views on life, and you're being put and forcefully taught all the ways of the white man. Okay, so that is usually how the main point or the main gist of our poem. It is talking about the influence of the white people or the colonizers into Pacific society and how they have changed us. They have made us more whiter. While they are getting more richer, our parents are getting more poorer. So all those things tie into the style and how it brings out the theme of our poem. Awesome. Now we'll discuss the themes of our poem. Now the first theme is westernization. Now the central idea in this poem is that due to westernization, a byproduct of progress, young people in the Pacific are becoming more Western in their ideas and ideals, and thus have lost their identity. This is clearly brought out in the use of repetition, where the persona claims that he has become whiter and whiter. Now, the kidnappers have become richer and richer, not only in the sense that they are being paid to kidnap, but in the sense that they have won over the young boy to their ideals and ideas. So not only are they getting richer through the money, by the ransom fees, which is the school fees that they have to pay, but also they're getting richer in their ways of that they have won. They have won over the natives by projecting their ideas and their culture on us, natives of our own country. The mama and papa have lost their son to the white world and thus have become poorer and poorer, as they have no one to take over after they are gone. Now they have become poorer in terms of traditional knowledge, lost forever, as they have no one to pass this knowledge on to. Once again, sometimes as if you had viewed my previous video on, you will realize that you should also be learned in your traditional skills. Just like the old man at the end of the poem says, "Come fishing with me today, for you have a lot to learn yet." Right? So that is also tied to our poem now. We have more to learn from, or even what we need to have a good foundation, which is our cultural knowledge, and then having to have a weak foundation, having all these westernization ways and ideals being put on us, we have no foundation, because at the end of the day, all these westernized ways, it could all be for naught, it could all be for nothing. And what do we have to fall back on if we do not know our cultural ways or traditional ways? Nothing. So that is the influence of westernization. Next one is change is inevitable, meaning change, it is going to happen. You cannot change that. Right? That's like saying death is inevitable. Everyone will die. Change will happen. Whether we accept it or not, change is going to happen. So the persona realizes that in his pursuit to attain formal education, he has lost his cultural values and identity. This is a reality in life, and we have to accept change. So yes, it is reality. There's going to be more cultural more cultural loss. There'll be more cultural degradation due to the influence of westernization being pushed on us. So what do you think we can do? Should we have a balance, or should we just abolish every Western values in our life? Or do you think we should accept it and have some kind of, like I said, balance? Right? It's entirely up to you, but that is a theme that is important to our poem. Next one is importance of education. Our parents want to give their children formal education, as it would enable the child to earn a living for himself or herself. Thus, they make sacrifices such as paying huge ransom fees, as well as keeping their children away in order to provide such education for them. So once they think education is important, yes, and they will always willingly give their child an opportunity to learn. Maybe they aren't, they're illiterate, they didn't learn how to read and write, so they want to give that opportunity to their children. So that is the importance of education. Okay, the last theme is the effects of colonization. Now, due to colonization and Western influences on Samoan culture, the traditional culture is fast disappearing. Young people are more interested in the Western ways and do not want to focus on the traditional lifestyle and culture. This can also apply to all Pacific societies and even Fiji. That is so true. Okay, this is not only for Samoan culture, but also in Fiji as well, or wherever you are listening or viewing this video from. If you are in the Pacific, this could also a mirror to your lifestyle and to your ways as well. We are slowly losing our way and our traditional ways because it is an effect of colonization. We are more interested in the Western ways rather than our own traditional lifestyle and culture. Alright, so those are the themes for our poem. Now, these are some questions. They don't usually come in your external questions, but I want you to actually, like the title suggests, it is a reflection questions. So how did you feel after reading the poem? Like, did you feel good? Like, just forget that you have to use this poem as means to pass your exams. How did you really feel? Did it make you realize what is happening to us, what is happening in our society? Or are you sad, or are you maybe feeling other emotions after reading this poem? It's always good to have these questions reflected. Do you understand the main idea or the main point of our poem? How would you describe the mood or the tone of the poem? So is the mood foreboding, right? Is it something, or is the mood a dark reality? Okay, you are looking at it and you just can't help but think, yes, this is really scary. All right, this is really scary what is going on. Okay, last reflection question. If you were the persona, do you think his thoughts are justified? Or do you think his satire about his parents growing poorer and him getting whiter, is it really worth mentioning? Or do you think we should be more accepting towards the colonizers and just think that our traditional ways are outdated? One thing, the beauty of learning about poetry, the beauty of learning about literature, everything is to your own interpretation. Okay, we are all different and we learn differently. So I hope you have enjoyed the video for today and you have learned as much and as you can. And once again, if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to ask me in the comments down below. Please leave a comment whether you understood or whether you feel that I should continue with my content. And I've also discussed some sample questions and on external questions on short story and poetry, but not under this theme, but under the theme of social issues. So once again, you can view those. Please like and subscribe. And I thank you once again for reaching to the end, watching this video. Hope it helps you with your revision, and all the best for your exams or test or whatever you are using this video for. Thank you, and vinaka bakaleo.